Hello everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 7th, 2024. My name is Darlene L. I am a recovered Al-Anon, and I will be leading this meeting this evening. We want to welcome everyone who's joined to our Al-Anon Big Book Recovery meeting. This is a STEP speaker meeting that meets every Wednesday night at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. That's 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We will study the 12 steps by using the precise instructions out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous as they relate to us as Al-Anons. So let's go ahead and get our meeting started. This is the original AA preamble written by the AA Grapevine, describing the fellowship in 1940. We study the preamble with an open mind and open heart to consider how it applies to Al-Anon. This helps us to stay focused on the message of recovery the pioneers intended, while observing the traditions in action. Through the actions taken based on the instructions of the basic text, we comprehend what the pioneers meant when they described the membership of AA, which is that they worked a program of recovery and they no longer drank. In our case, we no longer obsessed over the alcoholic. Through continuous action and study of these principles, the understanding of the value of the original preamble reveals itself. We ask for your humble consideration of our sincere admiration of the pioneers of Alcoholics Anonymous. The simple hope is that we of Al-Anon will grow into the same clarity and unity that birthed the original 12-step fellowship, because without them, after all, none of us would be here. The original AA preamble. We are gathered here because we are faced with the fact that we are powerless over alcohol and unable to do anything about it without the help of a power greater than ourselves. We feel that each person's religious views, if any, are his own affair. The simple purpose of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is to show what may be done to enlist the aid of a power greater than ourselves, regardless of what our individual conception of that power may be. In order to form a habit of depending upon and referring all we do to that power, we must first apply ourselves with some diligence. By often repeating these acts, they become habitual, and the help rendered becomes natural to us. We have come to know that as alcoholics, we suffer from a serious disease for which medicine has no cure. Our condition may be the result of an allergy, which makes us different from other people. It has never been permanently cured by any treatment with which we are familiar. The only relief we have to offer is absolute abstinence, the second meaning of AA. There are no dues or fees. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. Each member squares his debt by helping others to recover. An Alcoholics Anonymous member is an alcoholic who, through the application of and adherence to the AA program, has forsworn the use of any and all alcoholic beverage in any form. The moment he takes so much as one drop of beer, wine, spirits, or any other liquid containing alcohol, he automatically loses all status as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. AA is not interested in sobering up drunks who are not sincere in their desire to stay sober for all time. Not being reformers, we offer our experience only to those who want it. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and on which we can join in harmonious action. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our program. Those who do not recover are people who will not or simply cannot give themselves to this simple program. Now, you may like our program or you may not, but the simple fact remains that it works and we believe is our only chance to recover. There is a vast amount of fun included in the AA fellowship. Some people might be shocked at our seemingly worldliness and levity, but just underneath there lies a deadly earnestness and a full realization that we must put first things first, and with each of us, the first thing is the solution to our alcoholic problem. To drink is to die. Faith must work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. In order to set the tone for this meeting, I ask that we bow our heads for a few moments of silent prayer and meditation, followed by the serenity prayer. Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done. I wish to remind you that whatever is said at this meeting expresses our own individual opinion as of today and as of up to this moment. We do not speak for AA as a whole, and you are free to agree or disagree as you see fit. In fact, it is suggested that you pay no attention to anything which might not be reconciled with what is in the AA Big Book. If you don't have a Big Book, it is time you bought one. Read it, study it, live with it. Follow the directions in it and learn what it means to be an AA. End of preamble. A quick note here, a sponsor is anyone who has had a psychic change as a result of working the steps and has the willingness to work with others. For those looking for a sponsor to guide them through the steps, please stay tuned and have your pens ready to record phone numbers immediately after the meeting. Each Al-Anon group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying the message to the Al-Anon who still suffers. This is our primary spiritual aim. Our job as a group is to provide people with a place to learn about and work the steps. It has been our experience that working the steps consistently provides us with a better, saner life. We consider all else to be an outside issue. This includes personal problems. The proper venue for sharing such problems is with a sponsor. This is, after all, where real recovery takes place in working the steps with a sponsor. We are just so glad we are all here, and we are all here because we are not all there. There will be a period of fellowship after the meeting. If you have questions, if you need a sponsor, if you need to check in or get current, or if you want to discuss other literature, please stick around for the fellowship. That would be a better time for these subjects. So this is the first Wednesday of the month, and we will be discussing steps 1 through 3. We are going to start on the title page of the Big Book, and for your reference, we use the latest version, which is the 4th edition. So if you don't have a copy, again, we encourage you to get one. But you can also access the PDF version online. And if you don't have access to either, you can just simply listen and follow along as I speak about the steps. So on the title page where we'll start, it reads Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. So in the first page of the book, the first sentence of the book, we are shown a promise, right? How thousands of men and women have recovered. Now, this was published many years ago, and the numbers have only increased with time. But to see that, especially if you're new, should bring hope almost immediately. And often when we come here, we're very hopeless because we've often tried many, many things to recover from our crazy thinking, as was said, from our Al-Anonism, worrying about our alcoholic loved ones. And it just, nothing has worked. That's usually when we find ourselves here. I'm going to flip over to the preface, which is on page XI, and it reads, because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. So why is that important to note? As was mentioned, this, text was published originally, and as we can refer back to the promise that we just read, it works. The best analogy that I've ever heard and that I can share now is that, if you relate it to a recipe that you're going to follow for, I don't know, grandma's old recipe or whatever, your favorite dish, you're not going to go in and start changing ingredients, right, on, what you think might, if you can, you're certainly free to do that, but you're not going to get the same result that, grandma used to make or that, that you used to enjoy. And so this is much bigger than a recipe, but the concept is still the same, that we are not going to change anything that isn't broken. This has worked. This program of recovery has been adapted to multiple addictions, not just AA, although it was, AA was the founding, and it works every time. So we're not here to make changes or say that we have new ideas. That's all in the past. And if it's not, it's really hard to even find ourselves at step one, which we'll get to here shortly. So I'm going to move forward now to the first edition, which is on page XIII. And it reads, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no other further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend the alcoholic is a very sick person. And besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all. So a couple things to note here. We as Al-Anon tend to think that we understand our loved ones through and through, right? Before many of us come here, we just, most often it's a matter of thinking that they lack willpower, right? Why can't they just stop? We have so many reasons, if they loved me like they said they did, if they truly cared, they would just be able to give it up. And it's a very misunderstood illness. As it says here, the key word is seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, because for alcoholics and for us as Al-Anons, again, we've tried so many things and we really seem doomed. There are many unfortunates that are mentioned in the book that never find their way to recovery through the steps, and it truly is a blessing. But in order to find recovery, we really have to understand the problem that we are facing, which is the illness and itself. And so again, when we come here as Al-Anons, often we think we already have the answer, or maybe we realize we don't, right? And this is why we study the text, because all the answers are here that we need, not only for our loved ones, but especially for ourselves as well. So again, it says, we think the account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. And so again, we study the book as it was written to gain better understanding. So on the doctor's opinion, which begins on page XXVIII, give everyone a chance to flip there. I'm going to read a few passages here just to kind of help us better understand the illness. And the doctor that wrote this was William Silkworth. He was an expert in the field of alcoholism at the time of publication. He was like the go-to person for anyone who suffered from the illness, and he was very, very successful at helping people recover, right, from alcoholism. Now, he was very well respected, and he was a great man who was able to humble himself when he learned that there was a certain variety of drinker that could not be helped by his methods. And he wrote a lot of very helpful information for not only alcoholics who found themselves, unable to recover with human aid, but for, it proves to be helpful for us as well as Al-Anon, and anyone who applies, these principles and these steps towards their addiction. So I'm going to start reading here where it says, we believe and so suggested a few years ago that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. So again, he worked with so many alcoholics, helped many to recover, but he recognized that there was a certain variety, the chronic variety, that could not recover with standard methods and that could never safely use it, right? He goes on to mention that frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. As I mentioned, let me finish reading the passage here. It says, the message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. So, as I mentioned before, we as Al-Anons come in often to, come to our loved ones, and we just try to reason with them or give suggestions, and, they might have other friends and family members who care, or coworkers or what have you, who try to just reason with them and, give a pep talk and, hey, why don't you just do this? Or, hey, let's try doing a 90-day sober with me, whatever. We all have lots of ideas. Us as Al-Anons truly think we have the best ideas, right? And we get to the point where we try to manage and control our loved ones, and we make our lives chaotic as well, and those around us, and we just can't leave them alone because we just think that if we just try harder, if we just, stay on top of them, things will change eventually, right? It has to. But as it says, the frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message has to hold depth and weight for the alcoholic person. And what they mean by that is it has to come from someone who is also an alcoholic, who has their same illness, who suffers from the same illness. And we're the same, right? We've probably tried many things before coming to Al-Anon. Maybe we've read self-help books or gone to therapy, tried hypnosis, just white knuckling it ourselves, saying, okay, I'm just not going to call them for a week or 2 days or whatever. That's kind of like our self-reliance, relying on our own self-sufficiency, and it fails every single time. Maybe we find relief after a period of time, but no matter what, we always go back to our crazy thinking and we act upon it unless we have a new solution, which we can find through the steps. And part of that is getting a sponsor who has recovered and who is willing, obviously, to work with you and help you through it. Because, again, the message has to have depth and weight. And the only people who can relate to us are those who have actually lived it. Same for the alcoholic. So let's see. It goes on. We learn a lot about the alcoholic here in the doctor's opinion. I'll read this paragraph here. It says, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the truth from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless the person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. So how does this apply? We learn a lot here, right, about how the alcoholic thinks and acts. And how does this apply to us as Al-Anon? In many ways. So for us, we're not impacted unless we're alcoholic ourselves, but in our Al-Anon mindset, we obsess and try to manage and control because we like the effect that's produced by it, right? We learn when we come to work the program that everyone has defects of character. We're all human beings. Nobody's perfect. And we become restless, irritable, and discontent when something, right, doesn't go our way. For the alcoholic, their solution is to go to drink. And for us, it's to manage and control our loved ones. We feel like life will be okay if they just do this. It's that sense of ease and comfort, right, that we think we're gaining by managing and controlling essentially someone else's life. But, when we do this over and over, like it's normal, we don't really know anything else. And it talks about how we do it over and over, even despite, because we have that craving for the ease and comfort. So even if we've sworn it off or made a firm resolution, which I spoke about a bit already, it still comes back. We can try for some time, we can try certain methods, but we still find ourselves in the same behavior, the crazy thinking, the obsessive thoughts, acting upon them. And it does say that unless the person can experience an entire psychic change, then there's very little hope of his recovery. It goes on to say that once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. And for us, it's the desire to manage and control. And the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules, which is the steps that are laid out for us later in the book. So again, we're going to cover steps 1 through 3. I'm going to read just a couple more things that pertain to the doctor's opinion here, and then we can dive into the steps here. Give me just a second. Okay. So on page 23, which is in the chapter, there is a solution. It reads, these observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. And so that's the same for us. We have a defect in our minds where we, again, think we keep coming back. So even though we've made certain attempts and they failed repeatedly, we don't have a different solution. And so we keep going back to the same thing that we think will work. And we have all sorts of ideas again. We're like, okay, this time it will be different because, I don't know, our loved one has aged and they've matured and, we have so many ideas. But again, they never, without a different solution, we find ourselves in that same cycle. And so on page 24, it reads, the fact that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. And for us, it's for that first crazy thought, right? So even if sometimes it just takes a few hours, not even a day or a week. We literally, have lost all control. And the reason I'm reading this is it really is important to point out how we arrive at step one, essentially, because until we can be convinced that we are absolutely powerless over alcohol, essentially, right, and what it does for our alcoholic loved one and how it affects them, first comes the understanding portion, which we learn in the doctor's opinion, and there's so much more of that doctor's opinion. Truly is the first place to really start to kind of get a better understanding. But unless we're truly done, we cannot move forward. So, it does say on page 24, when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. On page 25, it says, if you are seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there was no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. So, as it says here, life becomes impossible for us. We literally have no other solution. We've tried everything. We're on our way, to step one when we can establish this way of thinking. If we can't get there, we have to do whatever it's going to take to get there. That's the only way the steps work. And I'll take a moment to just share a bit about my journey. So I actually came to Al-Anon after being in another 12-step program for an entire year. And before I was even able to work the steps there, I knew about that fellowship for an entire year before that. And I was like, cool, now I know, what this is and what I'm dealing with, and I have a name, and there's a fellowship. There's like people like me out there, right? And it was a sense of relief, but also I still thought that I had it figured out. And I literally took that fellowship and tucked it in my back pocket for almost exactly a year. And I was like, I'll call in if I need to vent or have support or be reminded that I'm not alone. But I think I still have this figured out. And I'm going to just try these things. The thing that worked the best for me, for the longest period of time once before, which wasn't very long. I couldn't even tell you how long it was because I, again, went back to, that illness, and I was fully in it. So once I decided to commit, worked the steps, was recovered for a year, I realized I needed Al-Anon. And I'm grateful that I found myself in Al-Anon because I was able to apply the steps to, as a solution to my crazy thinking around the alcoholic loved one. My point in me, sharing all that is that had I tried to start working the steps too soon, I would have failed. Not that we discourage newcomers from being here. You're the reason we're here. It's just important to note that unless you're truly ready, we encourage you to go out and do whatever it takes to arrive at the point of being able to truly admit that you're powerless over controlling our alcoholic loved ones, and we truly have to be humble enough to admit that our lives are unmanageable and that we need a new solution, something we have never thought to apply or try before. And so, we can go on to step one, and which reads, and the steps are all listed on page 59 and the chapter How It Works. Step one reads, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. On page 45, it mentions lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. So obviously, but where and how were we to find this power, right? So that's exactly what this book is about. Its main objective is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. So, many of us, and we're creeping into step two here, right, that which reads, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So this is a spiritual program of action, right? And many of us come to Al-Anon with an idea, or with a very, maybe not just an idea, maybe a very strong relationship with what we would call a higher power. Many of us refer to it as God. Again, this is not a religious program, so we don't talk about religion. It's truly just about being in touch with a higher power, whatever you call it. And again, some of us may doubt that this could even work, because if we've been in touch with a higher power previously, for me personally, I always knew God. I grew up knowing God. I knew God since I was a child. So I thought, not to discount my relationship before, but the big difference was I had not truly believed or practiced believing that God could handle this for me, right? Which is step two. I might have known God. I might have thought I was in touch, but for some particular reason, turning my alcoholic loved one over to God fully never crossed my mind. It wasn't a practice. Maybe I would pray a little here and there, but that wasn't enough. For me, and I learned that as I worked the steps, that even if I thought that I had been doing that here and there, essentially, I hadn't been, truly. And it took a level of humility and willingness, really, to see a new perspective on life and how I was going to approach, my relationship with my loved one, and stopping managing and controlling, and truly letting go and letting God. So, on page 47, it says we need to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? So for those who maybe have no concept, right, because we all come from different backgrounds. Some people have never been in touch with a higher power, and that's okay, because as it points out here, that we, even if we don't believe, we can have the willingness, right, to believe that there is a power greater than ourselves. And it goes on to say, as soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we empathetically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. So the key word here is willingness, and it's said several times. Because even if we have no notion, or even if we do, right, it's It's a matter of being willing to turn this over to the higher power, to our higher power. Because even if those of us who have known a higher power, we weren't doing that before. And those of us who didn't might have a little bit more work to do. Not to say it's harder per se, right? It's willingness. It's still a matter of willingness. And in the book is an entire chapter that's dedicated to agnostics. So, if you need a little help getting in touch and starting that path to even having the willingness to believe, that's in there too. Many fellows, like I said, we come from different walks of life, and not that you have to find a sponsor that, thinks exactly like you or was raised exactly like you, nothing like that. Again, just knowing that you're not alone, you're not the first person, perhaps never been in touch with a higher power. It's all about that keyword willingness to believe that there is something bigger that can handle this illness and, and help us recover. So, on page 60, we are getting closer to step 3. And so if you flip to page 60, it reads, our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. Being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. So just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? So again, I'm going to read step 3. It says, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So just like any recipe, right, which we referenced before, we can't skip steps. We can't go from 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 or back down to, 1 to 9 and back down to 2. We truly have to take this in order and fully. So step 3 is pretty major. We don't do that unless we know, they all are very important. I'm not discounting one over the other, but that is really the first step, sort of the action we have to take, right? So we can admit in step 1 that we're powerless. That can be pretty easy to do. That's how we find ourselves in these rooms, right? Or listening in. A little easier, right? We can just say, yeah, I'm out of control here. I'm powerless over it. And my life's a mess. That's pretty simple. Step 2, is coming to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us. It's almost like an idea, right? And it has to be a belief for sure. But again, it comes a little easier. Oh yeah, that's something that I've not really tried. And again, that's not something to take lightly, but it is a little easier to come to. But actually taking step 3 and making the decision to move forward with this new way of thinking and truly turning everything over, our will and our lives, over to the care of God as we understood him. That's a pretty major step. It reads on page 62, this is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director, right? He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, and we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arc through which we could pass to freedom. So again, it's really drilled in that this is the new way of living. This is how it's going to be from here on out. We are no longer in control of our own lives, right? But especially also our alcoholic loved ones. We are ready to turn that all over. And, in the doctor's opinion, we learn how we have that defective mind. So we're going to come back to that thinking, right? Even though we might say, yes, I'm ready to move forward. That is why we work these steps forever. 10, 11, and 12, which we'll get to eventually. I don't want to get ahead, but that is why we, we can admit all of this. We can take that action and going forward, say that we're going to live this way, right? Have the willingness to do it daily. But unless we, again, and I'm skipping ahead, like I said, we can't on the recipe, so forgive me. But the point is that we will find ourselves trying to do that again, managing control, instead of remembering at times, right, that I've chosen to turn my will and my life, this will power over to God. And that is why we work with a sponsor closely, because our sponsors keep us in check, essentially. We come up with all sorts of ideas, even after completing the steps, that we think we've still got this. And this is not something we will ever be cured from. We can recover and live in recovery, but we'll never be cured of this defect in our minds where we think over and over that we've got this. So again, as we get to step 3, on page 63, what's there? We learn, as we read through this chapter, just how much we thought we could handle life and sort of be in charge of everything, all of it. And it gives a really good story. If you're new and if you've never read it, it talks about, a person who is the actor in a show who tries to portray all of the roles for the production, the director, the lighting, the ticket master, and that, if you can put yourself in that position, that is us, right? That's you as an Al-Anon. We have this way of thinking that we can manage and control it all, and really we can't. And that's, what it referenced on page 62, that in this drama of life, essentially, right, God is the director. Truly always has been. We like to get in the way and make a mess of things. And so that's why, again, I just want to reemphasize one last time that we really have to be done. If we think that way of living is going to work, we truly aren't convinced. We really have to go out and take care of whatever it is we think we can make work before we commit, because again, step 3 is really big, and it's, we're promised things as well, when we decide to finally make this step, and it's a beautiful experience, not one to be taken lightly, and we're promised a lot of things that do come to fruition, and maybe not immediately. Everyone's journey is different, but if we stick the course and stick to that recipe, we end up with that beautiful, yummy, delicious, cake at the end of it all. And for us, it's recovery, and it's just a whole different way of living. It's almost hard to put into words, even though I've been in recovery for years now. It's so hard to explain it. I'm almost back into that same feeling of experiencing it over and over. It's truly magical. I'll leave it at that. So it says here, on page 63. When we sincerely took such a position, okay, ready to turn it over in step 3, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Being all-powerful, he provided what we needed. If we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, and as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. Those are some heavy promises. And they are, again, absolutely true. Remember, we can go back to that title page where thousands, and now it's tens of thousands of people have experienced this. 1, you have to truly be hopeless. 2, you have to have the willingness to believe that this can be handled by something other than yourself, somebody bigger, greater. And 3, we have to take the step to turn our willpower over to God. And when we do that, and as it says, keep close to him, if we keep close to him and perform his work well. So as I referenced before, these are only the first 3 steps. We have more work to do. And if we follow the steps as they're laid out and we keep close to God, all those other promises that I just read come to fruition. And it truly is remarkable. And it's not something, this is probably in this paragraph I just read, the best way to put it into words, but the experience of it all is just far greater. There's no words to describe it really. And truly you do feel reborn, and that sense of ease and comfort flows in almost immediately for many. Again, everyone's journey is different. So, it's been some time, and I'd like to say that I felt it pretty quickly. But one last note, that unless we show up and do what we're supposed to do daily and keep close to God, we can find ourselves pretty far from that experience pretty quickly, because we are very sick people. It helps to know and understand our loved ones on a greater level, which is what we do when we study this book. There's probably many days where we like to forget. I'll say I like to forget. And unless I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, then I'm quickly reminded. So yeah, that's steps 1 through 3. I'm just going to check the time here. I think I'm a little bit ahead. I am going to go back to, let's see. I had noted that we read the doctor's opinion pretty through and through, all the way through. We study this book, the first 164 pages, which have never changed. I don't think I mentioned that, so we'll go back to mention that. Those were the original text. So even though we're in the 4th edition here, the original text, the first 164 pages, have never been altered, aside from like some grammatical errors things like that. Small changes, very small changes. But everything else is what was originally published and has been republished time and time again with each new edition. So our fellowship, we study the big book, those first 164 pages, on a weekly basis. And, we have other opportunities like this evening where we can break it down further. And so, yeah, I was going to re-reference something here in the doctor's opinion. Give me just 1 second. I actually think we covered that. I don't want to be repetitive. So, yeah, I am going to find my place here. And try to time it just right, so bear with me. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do real quick for just a couple of minutes is go back and kind of, we really don't have too much longer, but I just want to maybe share a little bit more about how I mentioned that it took me some time to find Al-Anon, which I'm grateful it came through another fellowship. But even then, I took time to get to that fellowship. And so, I emphasized pretty well that there has to be a point where we've tried everything. And just kind of to give an example, I mean, whether it's, we try all sorts of things. I think that's kind of what I'm feeling led to emphasize, is that this illness can feel very isolating, especially if we grow up in a home where, maybe we have siblings or, other family members who don't struggle with this way of thinking, even though we all kind of come from the same, structure and family and background. And so, like, especially in my case, before Al-Anon and I found the other, 12-step program, like, we can feel very isolated in anything. And that's sort of the beauty of this fellowship, is that we all understand one another. But the reason I mention that is that we don't really often know that this is even a solution. We think sort of some of the more popular or maybe socially acceptable, if you will, because again, if you study the doctor's opinion, you learn so much about alcoholism, and we learn that it is a very misunderstood illness. And so even our own illness, our Al-Anon, being our Al-Anonism, we're misunderstood. We misunderstand ourselves. So it's natural for us to want to try all these things that are recommended for maybe someone who is not chronic, right? Who does not think the same way we actually do, who does not keep coming around and forgetting that what we've tried didn't work. So it's, it can feel very isolating and also frustrating that, like, why are we different, right? Like, why does this not work? Why does self-help books not work? Why does counseling not work? Why does hypnosis not work? All the things we've tried, swearing it off, having an accountability partner, and then to feel like, why doesn't my, sister or brother or mother or whoever feel the same way? Why is it me? And again, that's sort of the beauty of this fellowship and finding a recovered sponsor, because again, we have the same way of thinking. They understand you, that the message must hold depth and weight, if you remember from the doctor's opinion. And so it really can feel hopeless, which is where we have to find ourselves if we want something new. And then getting to step 2 is, again, having the willingness to believe that something greater, because we've never applied a spiritual program of action, or we would be here, or we wouldn't need this. That makes sense. So having the willingness to believe there is a new solution. And then from there, taking the actual action, taking the steps towards, turning it over to God. as we understood him, and making the decision that our old ways are over and that we're ready for a new life, and to try something new. And then we have all of those beautiful promises that are given to us even before, after you take step 3, you experience that, but even before making it through the rest of the steps. And there are more steps and more promises to come in later weeks. So I'm still very fortunate and blessed to have made it through, and to have found this fellowship and to have been given the opportunity to share the steps with you this evening. Truly, I do not take that lightly. So thank you for allowing me to share and to speak on the steps this evening. I'm going to go ahead and start our closing. It reads, 7th tradition, every group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. This group does not have a payment structure in place and currently requires no overhead expenses. So if you would like to fulfill Tradition 7, please direct contributions directly to the Al-Anon World Service Office by visiting alanon.org. It's al-anon.org. For questions about this meeting, or if you are looking for a sponsor, please send emails to Al-Anon Big Book Recovery at gmail.com. I'll say that once more. That's a long name. It's Al-Anon Big Book Recovery at gmail.com. No hyphens or anything in there. And I can repeat that at the end of the meeting as well if someone needs that information. Recordings of these meetings can be accessed on YouTube by searching at Al-Anon Step Speaker. That's at Al-Anon Step Speaker, no hyphens, all together. And you're going to type that right in the YouTube search box, and this our page will pop up with all the recordings on there. If you are interested in other Al-Anon meetings that follow the Big Book, please visit www.alanonbigbooksolutiongroup.org. Again, that's www.alanonbigbooksolutiongroup.org. Okay, I'm going to be reading from the Big Book on page 164, and it says, our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But you obviously cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and for countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Now let's have a moment of silence for the Al-Anon who still suffers, followed by the Lord's Prayer, or a prayer of your own choosing said in silence. Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. I'm going to end the recording now.